Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming on a Wednesday evening. We've got a little presentation here. I think this is very apropos because, I don't know, I feel like everyone's just under a lot of stress right now for all sorts of reasons. And I've got no shortage of it in my life, so I'm practicing what I preach. So this will be a fun little thing to talk about. I really enjoy exploring this with patients in the office. And yeah, we'll save the questions for the end, and we can chat and go on and go from there. So let's dive in. So we're looking to figure out how to manage stress in a chaotic world, and there's no shortage of ideas. I just have a few. Let's go into it. I'm going to assume the answer to this question is yes, because we're here. And if the answer, in fact, is yes, then you are not alone. Statistics show, right? We love statistics. More than 8 in 10 Americans report feeling emotions associated with stress in the last 2 weeks. This was a little bit ago. Nothing's any different. Stress impacts our physical health. Stress impacts our mental health. So we're all in it. The world's getting more stressful. Or I should say differently stressful. In some ways, we are not under the stresses that our ancestors were in, but they're different. So we'll talk about that and how that manifests differently in our physical bodies. Start with the basics. Stress is the body's response to a demand. It can be a physical demand. It can be a mental demand. But it's a response, it's a reaction, right? We are all mostly familiar with some of the hormones associated with stress, adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, cortisol. So adrenaline is the chief hormone that gets secreted in our fight or flight response. And there we've got a saber-toothed tiger. I use the fight the bear or run away analogy frequently. In that situation, and we know we've all had a situation, perhaps not with a saber-toothed tiger, but with a traffic jam or some interaction in some situation. So we know what coursing adrenaline feels like. And there are moments where that's a benefit and many other moments where not so much. Cortisol is a more slowly secreted stress hormone. It's part of what keeps us awake during the day, what wakes us up in the morning. So we need these things. These are important components in how we function in the world. And that fight or flight response is, it says, designed to aid survival in dangerous situations. So what's a dangerous situation? We'll talk more about that and how the fight or flight response has been sort of skewed. So what happens when we get stressed? Well, we know what happens when we get stressed because we feel it, right? We feel it regularly. Among other things, our blood pressure rises. Our breathing becomes more rapid. Our digestive system slows down, our heart rate rises. Our immune function goes down. That's a little more subtle, right? Our muscles become tense and sleep is hard to come by. So what are these things? So if we go and think about our saber-toothed tiger, if we need to rise to that particular occasion, then blood pressure rising, breath becoming more rapid, heart rate rising, muscles becoming tense, all those things are benefits because we're getting ready to fly into action. Right? The digestive system slows down because we have better things to do in that moment. One of the chief issues with stress today is that we don't have the physicality associated with it. Right? So most of our stresses are not so physical anymore. We don't have bears at the corner. Actually, we have them metaphorically at home, at work, in a car, everywhere else. And we'll talk about these things over and over for a bit. But these are physiological responses that have a benefit evolutionarily, but without the situation to use and engage them, then we start to feel bad. So if these are the things that are happening in our body, then how about some of the health issues that we think about? So we've got blood pressure rising, we've got hypertension or high blood pressure, we've got digestive system slowing down, we've got irritable bowel syndrome, we've got breathing becoming more rapid, heart rate rising, we've got anxiety, we've got panic attacks, muscles becoming tense, we've got back pain, we've got neck pain, we've got tension headaches. And of course, if you're getting ready to fight or flight, you're not going to fall asleep anytime soon, and we've got sleep issues. So the thing that I talk about with most people that come in the office is how these things are related, because I see people every day for high blood pressure and for digestive issues and IBS type symptoms and for neck pain and back pain and headaches and sleep issues. And as we all know, there's a pill for that, right? There is blood pressure medication, and there's GI pills, and there's anti-inflammatories, and there's sleep aids, and there's all sorts of things to take for anxiety. And that's fine. And there's a time and a place for all those things. But if we think about underlying cause, then we go back to why those things are happening, where those symptoms are coming from, what the physiology is, and we realize that there's not infrequently an underlying stress component to a lot of the things that we are thinking of as nuisance symptoms or health problems. No surprises here, just really going to drive this home today. We're under a lot of stress. It's everywhere. There's the list, all the things. You can come up with some more, I'm sure. It hits us before we get out of bed in the morning because we're faced with it, right? Because the first thing we do sometimes is pick up our phones and see what bad thing happened where else in the world, or what the work email says, or all the rest of it. And, you know, it's great to be connected. And there's a darker side too, when we're always on. The thing is with most of these stresses, again, is that they are, you could say, mental emotional, right? So there's not a physical, sometimes, but often there's not a physicality to the stress. So all these things that happen as a result of feeling stressed, going back to all those symptoms from before, there's nowhere for them to go, and they build up inside us, and we start to feel not so great. So one thing to remember, of course, we don't want to demonize stress, because stress is in fact a part of life. If we didn't have some stress in our life, we'd be bored out of our minds. We'd have nothing going on. Stresses improve our performance. They help us grow. They push us. And the truth of it is, being a little uncomfortable sometimes is a good thing, right? Again, it helps us grow. There's the caterpillar into a chrysalis, turning into the butterfly metaphor. And simply put, in order to grow and develop and become the best versions of ourselves, we have to go through some hard stuff. So it's important to keep that in mind too. So I just want to go through again. We talked about some of these things, but the more I see people and talk to people and spend more time with people and talk about all these conditions, the more I understand how much of a factor stress plays in so many of our health issues. And you see a list on one side of these short-term symptoms, we see a list on the other side of these longer-term symptoms. Of course, there's combinations of one and the other, and everyone looks a little different, and we all have our special way that stress manifests for us. as we go through and identify the different ways that we have imbalance in our life, the stressors are often the ones that, are the hardest to pin down. I have someone come into the office for the first time, we talk about all the things, and then I explain my simple little health philosophy. You come in, you sit in the chair, it's got 4 legs. You didn't think twice about keeping you up. The 4 legs of the chair are what we eat, how we move, how we sleep, how we deal with our stress. So all those things are a challenge. You can't put any of them into a pill. They take time, they take effort. It takes some time and some work to change your diet. It's hard work. And finding time to exercise regularly, challenging, but we can do it. Finding good sleep, challenging. You can make some changes. Stress is usually the last challenge standing, because again, it doesn't just go away. We have to manage it. We have to find better ways to do that. So this is just great. Did you know? I didn't know. Did you know that stressed is just desserts spelled backwards? So perhaps the solution is simply chocolate cake. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't know what the conspiracy is, but we can figure that out later. Don't eat all your stress. That's the answer. So what do we want to do? We want to try to find some peace and balance and calm in our lives. This was just the stock photo in this particular PowerPoint background thing, and I left it in because it seemed fitting. And so I wrote some corny verbiage around it. But it's a reasonable question. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing, but where is your cherry blossom forest? And I think the point is that we all need that place. We all need that thing, that place. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional, but that place that we go to that brings us a sense of calm. And, we hear about this, right? What's your happy place? Go to your happy place. I think it's important. I think we need a place like that. Maybe it's a place we can go to that exists in the world. Maybe it's a place we go to that is in our minds. Probably good to have a couple places, right? Variations on a theme, a little diversity. But we need that. We need to find a way to create balance and find some peace in a crazy world. So the key is, actually, the last thing here, we have a choice. I think when we get really overwhelmed, it just feels, overwhelming, right? So we get lost in the swirl of the whole thing, and it feels like the world is happening to us. Oops, sorry. And it's important and I think empowering to acknowledge and remember that we have a choice in how we respond to things. And that's, the short of it is that's what mindfulness is being in a moment and being thoughtful before we react. And, we have to remind ourselves of that over and over and over and over. And we can think we have it all pulled together, and then it just gets unraveled again, right? Sometimes over really silly little things, but that's being human, and we do the best we can, and we forgive and we move forward and keep on trying. So what's the opposite? The opposite of that sympathetic fight or flight response is the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's our rest and digest system. So more or less, this list of things is the opposite of the other list of things. Immune system starts working better. Digestion starts working better. Muscles relax. Our heart rate goes down. All right, this feels nice. Now, the goal, of course, is not to just live in the parasympathetic universe, because you'd just be like a big pile of mush on the ground. And that doesn't work either. So, back to balance, right? But that's our goal. That's our goal in moving out of that reactive, sympathetic fight or flight response into something a little bit more balanced. So how do we get there? Well, the path towards parasympathetic balance and nervous system support is varied. There are many, many, many paths up the mountain. And typically it's important to engage in more than one because different things get us to different places. When I see patients for the first time, I'll ask them all the questions about health concerns and sleep and food and movement. And I'll ask about stress. What kind of stresses do you have in your life? And more importantly, how do you manage them? And do you feel like you're managing them well? And it's really remarkable how many people, when asked what they do to manage their stress, just don't have a lot to say. I just don't know. I don't know. I just kind of deal with it. Or sure. And we see it. We see that play out, right, in various health concerns that come up, and the nervous system starts to lose balance. So there are some. None of these things are all that revolutionary, but it only works when you do them and you do them somewhat consistently, right? I am a strong believer that physical exercise is remarkably important, not just for the physical body, but for the mental body too. I mean, the research is thorough and extensive. There's a book called Spark by John Rady. He's a medical doctor. If you want to read more about the relationship between exercise and mental health, cognition, intelligence, it's all about kids and brain development and focus and attention. It's great. But anyway, I think we need to move. We're physical creatures. We desperately need physical activity, and we're just living more and more in a world that makes that really avoidable. It doesn't matter what it is, but we need to do something. We need to do something that gets our blood pumping through our blood vessels, because we need that for our cardiovascular system. But that's good for our brains too, because our brains need the movement of blood. And then as we get older, we need some strength training because our muscles start to break down into fat, and for all the reasons, right? The stretching and the balance, and all these different practices from different cultures, yoga, tai chi, it's all movement, right? So every culture has a history of some type of movement, and it's usually tied into breath, which we look at too. But these things are vitally important. You all know this. You may or may not be doing anything about your knowledge of this. That's the tough part. We've got our relaxation exercises. There's various things. It's the internet, right? Like Google it. You can find a million different meditations, whether they're walking meditations or sitting meditations or guided meditations or silent meditations or music meditations or blah, 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 blah. It's all great because so you got to just find the thing that works for you, right? And you have to explore that, and no one can tell you what it is that you need exactly. It's just a matter of finding it and seeking it. Breathing techniques we're going to talk about a little bit more. And I'm a huge proponent of counseling and talking about things, and the wheels don't have to be falling off the bus before you start talking to somebody. Therapists and counselors have been harder to come by in the recent years. But that's changing, and with some persistence, you can make a connection. General social supports, making sure people have good support in their lives, I think is obviously really important. We're social creatures, and we've become more isolated even before the past couple of years, but especially in the past couple of years. So these are basic things, but I make a point to not overlook the basics before we skip to the more sophisticated and advanced stuff, because this is the foundation. You have to eat good too. I should have put that on here. One stress management technique and strategy is good diet. I found this from the National Institutes of Health. I just thought it was really cool. They stretched it with some of these letters. start journaling, not journaling because there's no J anywhere, but these are great. It's so, it really touches on a lot of points, and I might put this up somewhere. I don't know. There's the eating, there's the socialization, stay informed, not obsessed. I think that's a really important piece right now, given the deluge of information that is drowning us all unless we take some steps to slow down the faucet. Talking to others, which sounds a lot like social isolation or avoiding it. Mindfulness, play, do something fun. Deserve it. Breathing, I have a problem with the deep breaths, but we'll talk about that. Enough sleep. Gratitude. Let's be thankful. Getting outside and getting support. So masters, isn't that great? Of course, there's an app for that. So here's just a little short list of different things that we can, different tools on our fancy little devices that might help. Like we'll use the Calm app. This last one, we're going to talk about some more, but let's just get into the meat of the next thing here. So, how about this breathing thing? So, I focus on breathing a lot with my patients. So I've had the 4 legs of the chair, right? What you eat and how you move and how you sleep and how you deal with your stress. And more recently, I've taken to how we breathe. So if we just go back for a second, the general advice that we're given under stress or in stressful situations is to take a deep breath. That can be helpful, but it cannot be helpful too. We don't need to take deep breaths, is the thing. The point here is that carbon dioxide is not a waste product. It's not something we're just trying to get rid of. When we breathe, we need to obtain adequate amounts of oxygen and carbon dioxide from the air, okay? Because it's the carbon dioxide that drives the oxygen into the cells. Without adequate levels of CO2, the oxygen is in the blood, but it doesn't get to the organs, to the end product, and to the cells. And the problem that we find is that shallow, rapid breathing reduces blood volumes of carbon dioxide. Bad things happen with this, okay? Now, this also correlates back to what I was talking about with how stress is different. When we're in a physically stressful situation and we start breathing more heavily and more rapidly in a way that matches our surroundings or activity, this sort of just works itself out. And when we have nowhere to put that energy, that's when we tend to do this shallow, rapid breathing, which affects these CO2 levels, which affects oxygen and blood flow. So here's what happens. We call this shallow breathing overbreathing because you're sort of breathing too fast. It's funny because you're kind of not breathing enough, but it's called overbreathing. It's synonymous with hyperventilation. So here's a nice image of blood circulation flow into a brain when we're breathing normally, and then we see the significant reduction in blood with hyperventilation or overbreathing, 25% in fact, and notable during a panic attack, 60% reduction. So that's really dramatic. So what I tell people in the office when I'm talking about this is that right now we could start breathing shallow and rapid and more or less throw ourselves into a panic attack or close, right? Us, by breathing in a more beneficial way and practicing that, we can do the opposite, move us into a more parasympathetic state. So here's the crux of it. These are symptoms, potential symptoms of overbreathing. Read them. dizzy, weak, brain fog, pounding heart, mild chest pain, muscle cramping, anxiety. So, I mean, what are all these? Like, if you took the top line off, right, and you looked at these, you're like, yeah, that's anxiety, right? Or that's bordering on a panic attack. It's the same list. The list of symptoms that manifest when we overbreathe is the same list that we associate with anxiety, because when we breathe shallowly and rapidly or improperly for long enough, this is what starts to happen. So what we need to do is relearn how to breathe. So we can think about taking a deep breath, not that deep. If you ever have a baby around, look at how the baby breathes. We knew how to breathe. We, like many other things, we lost it along the way. So we go back to that app from before. So I have no stake in this app. I just think it's really nice because it's simple. It's no frills. There's no bells or whistles. I guess there are actually bells, but not those kinds of bells. But when I'm talking to folks about this, I use this app a lot as a guide because it can help us to create a different sort of breath. So there's a couple of different settings on there. The one I use the most with patients is a measured breathing setting. So it's the numbers, if you can read that, are the inhale, exhale, and sometimes there's a hold in there. And essentially a longer exhalation, a normal inhalation and a longer exhalation promotes the increase of carbon dioxide in the body, which drives the oxygen where it needs to go, which shifts all these symptoms. The thing to remember about all this is that it's physiological, right? When you breathe in a more healthful way, you are changing the pH in your blood. You're changing the way that carbon dioxide and oxygen are moved about the cells, and that affects how the nervous system works in a very direct way. So there's nothing kind of woo-woo or spiritual or I mean, there's nothing wrong with those things, but it's important to know that this is something that just happens. You do it, and this is the physiological response. So a little bit about why this helps. People might be familiar with heart rate variability. We think of the heart beating like a metronome, regular, boom, boom, boom. A healthy heart beats regularly, but there is a small amount of variability between each beat, as you can see on this EKG reading here. And that variability between the beats is our heart rate variability. If you have a watch or any of those fancy wearable devices, now most of them are able to monitor heart rate variability. Without having some tools around it, it's hard to know like what that means and what it does. But when we breathe in a more appropriate way, more regularly, we increase our heart rate variability. That's the key into the parasympathetic nervous function. That reduces inflammation, it increases overall wellness. We feel better when our heart rate variability is higher. If you wear one of those wearable things, it almost seems arbitrary. You wake up, get tired, you wake up a bit slower. The breathing practice is a tool to help us monitor it, control it, modify it. So how does biofeedback fit into all this? Well, it's just a tool to get us to a place of greater understanding of how our body works. So biofeedback is a very general term for gathering some kind of information from the body and using it to make some type of informed decision or shift. So, it can be very, very simple. Information typically does as well. This is a whole lot of words, but the important thing, so what we're measuring heart function, breathing, muscle activity, skin temperature. With the feedback, we can make change over time. And then the key is once you learn that process and you kind of unlock the door, then you don't need it anymore. So what I really love about doing this is that I teach people this tool and then they can go run with it. So it's not like something that you have to come back and do over and over and over. Massages are great, and all these self-care things that we do are really wonderful, but it's nice to have something that you always have. It's not a pill, doesn't cost anything. It's just knowledge about how your body works. So there's something very empowering about that. And part of, if we're talking about anxiety and stress, it's a lack of control. So this is taking some of that control back. So to that point, the key is that information helps us learn faster. So I correlated to trying to first fly a plane without having a view of any of the dials and instrumentation. Eventually you probably figure it out. You crash a bunch of times and maybe go through 3 or 4 planes before you figure it out. But if there was an instruction manual and some instrumentation and some dials that gave you information about what you were doing, gosh, you would just learn a lot faster, right? And that's really what biofeedback is getting information so that we can fine tune. And people do really, we pick it up really quick because it's clear, right? It's quantified, it's right in front of us. Similarly, we're trying to play Beethoven. First we have to learn to play the piano, and then the sheet music really helps, right? So these are tools. And then another thing to sort of point out in lines with that metaphor is that if someone comes in and they're feeling very anxious, feeling very stressed, and we start doing some breathing, at first some people are just terrible at it, right? And that's discouraging because it's just breathing. But if we're tacked out in that sympathetic overdrive all the time, then yeah, doing breathing differently is going to feel really weird, kind of uncomfortable. But just like we wouldn't expect to play a sonata without practicing for a long time, same rules apply. So what's biofeedback good for anyway? Well, you kind of have an idea at this point. I'm not going to say all the things, because it's not all the things, but everything listed here has research behind it. And there's more and more growing research on biofeedback for all sorts of things. And, if we think about it in terms of what we just talked about, it makes sense because there is a stress component to at least all the things listed here. Some of them more indirectly, like you see diabetes on the list. Like, well, how biofeedback hold diabetes? Well, when we're in that fight or flight response under more stress, the body releases glucose because you need sugar to have the energy to fight the bear. So I see many diabetics that are pretty well controlled, and then they're in some stressful situation, and all of a sudden their blood sugar spikes up, can't get it back down. So that's how that works. And everything else here we mostly talked about. Raynaud's disease is on here. So that's where your fingers constrict and get very cold and sometimes white and painful in the cold temperatures. That's a circulatory issue. And it turns out that the vessels at the end of our fingers and toes, they're entirely sympathetically driven. So what we need to do is bring that down, and it's harder to do, but it is possible, very possible, to help to shift that external body temperature and that creates a shift in the vasodilation, and we can improve Raynaud symptoms. Now, I mostly focused on anxiety and stress. That we do heart rate variability, biofeedback, for muscle tension, for migraines and stress headaches. There are sensors that can go on different muscles, and if we learn how to literally reduce tension in those areas, and then it's a sort of a mindful practice to reduce it over time. I had to put at least one study in here. Again, there's lots and lots of research. This was just a systematic review of many chronic diseases. I highlighted them here. Kind of from the last slide, just pointing out that it's not just the obvious stuff. It's not just anxiety and insomnia that is affected, because all these things are stress related. So, they always sort of like cage their response in these studies. HRVB is heart rate variability biofeedback. Could be effective in managing patients with chronic diseases. I will say that it's pretty well proven that it works. Because like we said, the common denominator is stress, right? And seeing patients and people for mostly chronic disease issues, we talk about inflammation, right? I see lots and lots of people for cardiovascular issues, and it's all about inflammation, right? If we're talking about cholesterol, it's the inflammatory process that drives the wrong kind of cholesterol into the blood vessels, does the damage. So if it's all about inflammation, where does the inflammation come from? And it's what we're eating, it's how we're moving, it's how we're sleeping, and it's how we're managing our stress. With lots of inflammation, all sorts of bad things happen. We've got decreased immunity. We've got excess cortisol, which just makes us feel junky until we feel exhausted, and then we get sick. So like we talked about, we need to find that balance. It's going to be different for every person. I really am so grateful about having the ability to journey on these things with people and explore these things with people. And I strongly believe that this is really what medicine is and should be in healthcare. And I think that's lost. I think you're all here and we're having this conversation because you have a notion that it's lost. I think there is time and a place for medication, and it helps many, many people all the time. But if we want to really get down to what is wrong, then we have to look at the things that we're doing every day and the places where we're in and out of balance. And that takes time, that takes effort, that takes motivation, but the potential benefit on the other side, I think, is just tremendous. I don't know if I can do this on a webinar. I was going to do some practicing. So there's many different kinds of breathing practices. That longer exhalation, the 4-1-7 measured breathing on that awesome breathing app, is what I use when I'm going to start doing biofeedback with people, because it is closest to where we want to go with the practice. There's something called resonance frequency breathing, which is more or less your sweet spot, like the point at which the timing at which you are optimal in your nervous system. And that was something we can quantify when we have the monitor and we're doing the biofeedback. It's usually somewhere between 5 and 7 breaths per minute. I didn't put it in here, but I saw a slide or a article while I was looking about how breath rates have changed over time. And I didn't really dig in to see if it was like really legit, but it was interesting and sort of suggesting that we just, as a culture, we just breathe faster, right? Our breath rate used to be like 6, 7 breaths per minute. And now it's 12, 14, 16. And that shifts everybody into the capacity for having some of that dysfunctional breathing. So many people may have heard of box breathing. It is in fact used in the Navy by the Navy SEALs. And, these are people that are under really significant stress, obviously. Different kind of stress, but still. They've found that it works because it does. So the box breathing is simple because it's easy, and part of it having something to fall back on when you're under stress and complicated things get lost. But breathing in for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4 seconds, and holding your breath seconds. And if we practice that over some time, we can use it as a tool to bring us down in stressful situations. When I do biofeedback with people and work on breathing practice, it is something you have to keep up with, right? So you spend starting 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day doing a breathing practice, and cumulatively that makes a big difference, right? So in the same way that you would go to the gym or exercise or work out, whatever you do, regularly, right? If you just exercise once every couple of weeks, you would, it's fine, but it's not going to do very much cumulatively. When we maintain a breathing practice, an appropriate and healthful breathing practice regularly for a longer period of time, it brings the body into that more calmative state, and it sort of tonifies the nervous system so that we have an easier time responding to stresses at other times when we're not breathing like that. And then also it gives you a tool to use when you're in those more stressful situations. Some people are more prone to panic attacks. There's certain protocols and recommendations around breathing that are really helpful in those situations too. Because, going back to that slide of what happens when you breathe poorly, a panic attack, you saw the blood flow just is a more severe manifestation of the same thing. Panic attacks are crazy. You can literally feel like you're dying, even if you know it's a panic attack, right? It's really, really nutty how powerful the physiology is. Whenever someone, says anything about, it's all in your head, or you're stressed, you're worried, it's all in your head. Okay, well, that's fine, but the head's really powerful. You can make really dramatic changes by thinking and shifting how you think, and the breath is our inroad to that, essentially. Maybe you've been square box breathing while I've been talking. I don't know, but I was in a room, we would do this. Many people have heard of this book at this point. Came out a number of years ago. It's called Breathe. And I will say that this is the book that really got me going on all this. This was a patient recommended it many years ago, 2 years ago, and it totally blew my mind. No matter what you eat, how much you exercise, how skinny or young or wise you are, none of it matters if you're not breathing appropriately. I think there's a lot of truth to that, turns out. I really recommend this book. It's available in audio form for people that aren't much for reading, but it's great. It's great information, and it's also just enjoyable and engaging. So, this one over here, the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. Breathe through your nose. If you can't breathe through your nose, put some tape over your mouth. Or maybe we should talk about it first. That's it. Ran through it kind of quick. I'm happy to take some questions. I'm Dr. Craig Fasullo. I don't know if I said that at the beginning, so I apologize. It's always sort of funny to not see anybody and just look at the screen. I'm not really used to these webinar things entirely, but that's okay. So here's the name of the practice. I practice in Manchester and in Stonington. We take insurance. Someone will probably ask, so biofeedback is sometimes covered by insurance. It depends on your insurance. Most biofeedback providers don't take insurance because it's not that don't pay that much, but we do partial insurance coverage for people that have that. There's a CPT code. It's 90901. I didn't write that down anywhere. So that's something you can look into, and I'm happy to take some questions. Chantel, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right. Good.
For all the participants, if you have any questions at all, you can throw it in the chat real quick for us. And Dr. Fasullo will be happy to answer any of your questions that you may have. Okay, Dr. Fasullo, I do see a question that says, how long is an appointment? And is it only one?
Oh, good questions. So it's not only one. It's a bit of a learning process, right? So for people I currently see in the office, we schedule. If you're not a patient, then you know if you something different. But biofeedback sessions run 45 minutes, and we book the first 3 sessions at the same time because I find that you need at least 3 sessions to sort of like, you know, get a handle of what the whole thing is and develop a bit of a practice for yourself. Some people are really quick learners, and after 3 sessions, they're good to go and off to the races. Many other people take a couple more sessions to get a handle on it. Once you sort of learn how it works for you, some people find to come back and check in once a month or so is helpful for them. Some people don't, but it's once you get it, it's just a matter of doing it, right? And like anything else, you put the time in and you do it, and it works really well. So I'd say average 3 to 6 sessions for most people to get to the other side and have a tool that they can then use moving forward.
Okay, another question is, does it benefit Crohn's disease? And how much is a session if paying out of pocket?
Crohn's disease, is that the question?
Yes, does the techniques that you shared with us, will it help with Crohn's disease?
Yeah. So inflammatory bowel diseases are a little bit different than the more functional diseases. The response is if there is a stress component to the Crohn's disease, then it probably will help. So it will not cure Crohn's disease. But I see a lot of folks with Crohn's disease that have, are managing pretty well with what they have with diet, mostly, primarily, and then some supplements, and sometimes, sometimes some medications. If that person just tended to be a more stressed, anxious type of person, then I think the biofeedback would be a really nice extra layer for that. If they didn't have that piece so much, then it probably might be less effective.
The second part of the question was, how much is a session if paying out of pocket?
So the way we do it is that if you have insurance coverage, the package of the first 3 sessions is an additional $200 as a admin equipment fee. For the total for 3 sessions, if you don't have insurance coverage, it's $400 for 3 sessions initially, and then moving forward, it can be individual, or sometimes we'll do an additional 3.
Okay, another question is, I missed most of the call, internet issues. Will it help with PTSD and anxiety?
That's a big yes. and more or less for all the reasons. The slides are in there, but like hard yes. And if you're interested, we can talk about it more. I've seen really dramatic stuff, like some debilitating PTSD, really severe anxiety, and for people, you have to do it, right? It's not, I don't fix you. Like, I mean, that's how I think about medicine. Like, I don't heal people. I help them heal themselves. And this is such a powerful tool, but you have to make the time for it. So for the people that make the time for it and are committed to it, it works more or less every single time. And there's benefit every single time, because again, it's physiological. When you breathe differently, things change in your body, regardless if you believe them or you don't believe them, or you think it works or you don't think it works. That doesn't matter.
Okay, are there any other questions for Dr. Fasullo? Another question that came up is, would it help with kids with anxiety?
That's a great question. So the answer is yes, in general. So there's many, again, biofeedback is this very general term, and it can look like a lot of things. There are practitioners out there that do different kinds of biofeedback specific to kids. I'm not really one of those, so it's just a matter of what the tool, like what the technology is. With heart rate variability, you have a monitor, you have a little sensor on your finger, and it has to be very still. So essentially, if this child can sit still and keep their hand still, then yes, we can find benefit in that. But if they're a little jittery and a little anxious in like a physical sort of way and can't sit still, then I don't have the tools to be able to help them. But it's feasible. I just don't have that capacity.
Another question is, does it help with insomnia?
Helps with insomnia. I mean, right, sleep issues, complicated. And, if you have sleep apnea, then that's not going to help sleep apnea, right? So there's lots of reasons why we don't sleep. But many, 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 many times there is a stress component, and we've got racing thoughts, and we can't get all the stuff out of our brains. So in all the ways that stress affects our sleep, there is a lot of benefit that I've seen there for that.
Any more questions for Dr. Fasullo?
All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for spending some time. And
Absolutely.
if you have any further questions, then just reach out to the office, and love to help. I just, it's getting harder and harder to deal with all the things in the world. And I've been really astounded how beneficial this little tool has been to help people navigate through it and find something that empowers them to be able to feel better in their bodies and in their minds.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fasullo. This program presentation was very informative. I did have a couple of people on there that said thank you, and they're going to make some calls to look into the biofeedback process further. And for everyone that has joined this evening, the program was recorded. I will be editing the recording a little bit over the next couple of days, and we'll be sending that out to everyone so you can take another look at it or whatnot. And if you have additional questions, then obviously the information to reach out to Dr. Fasullo directly is on the last page of the slides. And so again, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the program. Everybody have a good night.
Everybody.
Take good care.